So today we're going to be multiplying and dividing rational numbers. Our essential question for today is how can you use what you know about multiplying and dividing integers to multiply and subtract rational numbers? Our goals are to multiply and divide rational numbers as well as to solve real-life problems. So when we are multiplying and dividing rational numbers, we are going to use the same rules for signs as we used for integers. So when we were multiplying with integers and those numbers had the same signs, what we knew was that the answer would be positive. And when we were dividing integers with different signs, we knew our answer would be negative. So again, when we were doing dividing integers with the same sign, when they had the same sign, the answer ended up being positive. And when we were dividing with different signs, our answer was negative. So what we are going to be seeing here is when we are multiplying and dividing rational numbers, it's going to follow the same pattern. If we multiply or divide numbers with the same sign, our answer is going to be positive. If we multiply or divide numbers with different signs, that means our answer is going to be negative. Okay, for this first example, we're going to be dividing rational numbers. And as we're looking right here, we have this division with our fractions in here, which means that we need to remember that we are going to, instead of dividing by the fraction, multiply by its reciprocal. And we have our little reminder down here what a reciprocal is. If we have the fraction a over b, where a can be any number and b can be any number except for 0, then we know that our reciprocal of a over b is going to be equal to b over a. So we're going to turn it on its head. Its denominator is going to become the numerator, and its numerator is going to become the denominator. So as we look at these two problems here, the first thing that we need to do is make sure that they are put into improper fraction form. So 5 times 5 is going to be 25, plus 1 is going to be 26, all over 5, and we remember it's going to be negative. So and then we're going to divide that by 3 times by 2, which is 6, plus 1, which is 7. So we have 7 all over 3. And now we need to multiply instead by the reciprocal. So we're going to flip this second fraction on its head so that we end up with negative 26 all over 5 times by 3 over 7. So when we do this, again, when we're multiplying fractions, we just multiply straight across. So as we do that, we are going to have 26 times by 3. And 3 times 6 is 18, carry that 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is going to be 7. So I'm going to end with negative 78 all over 35, and that is going to be my answer right there. Now as we look at this second problem, we're going to need to put these into improper fraction form as well. So 3 times by 4 is going to be 12, plus 1 is going to be 13, so I have 13 all over 4. And we're dividing that by 8 times by 1, which is 8, plus 1, which is 9, negative 9 all over 8. So when I'm dividing by a fraction, I need to remember to multiply by the reciprocal. So I need to flip this second fraction on its head. So we're going to do 13 over 4 times by 8 over 9, and that can be a negative 8 or a negative 9. It doesn't matter as long as we keep that negative in there. And we are going to then multiply straight across, so I can see 13 times by 8 is going to be 24, 104, and that's going to be 104 negative all over 36. Now this is my answer, but I need to simplify this answer as far as possible, so I'm going to divide both top and bottom by 2. So I'm going to end up with negative 52 all over 18, and then again I can see these are both even, so I can reduce them even farther, and this negative 52 is going to become a negative 26 all over 9, and we can see that we cannot simplify this any farther because 9 is only going to be divisible by 3 and itself, and 3 does not go into 26 and 9 does not go into 26, so we are fully simplified and we have our answers. So for example 2, we are going to multiply rational numbers, and we can just go ahead and multiply these numbers together. So how we're going to do that is going to put 2.5 times by 3.6 And when we're multiplying and dividing by these decimals, it's not necessarily important that we have our decimal points lined up, as those are going to come into play later. But we're just going to multiply this like normal, so 6 times by 5 is going to be 30. So put down that 0, carry the 3. 6 times by 2 is going to be 18, is going to be 12, plus 3, which is going to be 15. Then I'm going to add a 0, and then 3 times by 5 is going to be 15, carry the 1, and 3 times by 2 is going to be 6 plus 1 is going to be that 7. So as I look at this, I'm going to end up adding these now, and it's 0, 10, and 9. So we're going to end up with 900 for our answer here. But we know that 2.5 times by 3.6 can't possibly be 900. And that's because we are going to be moving one decimal place here, one decimal place here, for a total of 2 decimal places. So that's going to be 1, 2. So our decimal is going to have to end up right here. So our final answer on this is going to be -9. And it is negative because we were doing a negative times by a positive, which means our answer should be negative. For this second one here, again, we're just going to line these up. So we have 4.8, and we're going to times that by 5.2. And so we're going to take 2 times by 8, which is 16, carry the 1. 2 times by 4, which is 8, plus 1, which is 9. And then we're going to add that 0. 5 times by 8 is 40, carry the 4. And 5 times by 4 is 20, plus that 4 is going to give us 24. So as we look at this, we are going to end up with a 6, a 9, a 4, and a 2. So again, when we look at this, we are coming in 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places. So on our answer, we're going to come in 1, 2 decimal places, and we're going to be at 24.96 for our answer. Now we have a negative times by a negative, which means our answer should be positive because we are multiplying 2 numbers with the same sign together. Okay, for example number 3 here, we are going to be multiplying more than 2 rational numbers together. So in the cases where we may have 3 or more numbers that we need to multiply together, we are just going to take it step by step. And again, with this first problem right here, we are going to follow the order of operations and work inside our parentheses and brackets first. So we're going to take this -1/7 and we're going to set it off to the side real fast while we're going to multiply the inside of this problem first. So as we do this, we need to multiply this, and we can turn this -7 into a fraction by putting it over 1. So we're going to have 4 over 5 times by -7 over 1. When we're multiplying fractions, we are just going to multiply straight across. So we're going to end up with -1/7 times by 4 times by 7, which is -28, all over 5, because 5 times by 1 is 5. And now that I have my fractions that I can again multiply, so -1 times by -28 is going to be +28, and 7 times by 5 is going to be 35. Now I can look at these and I can say, oh, I know 28 is divisible by 7, and I know 35 is divisible by 7, which means my final answer is ending up at 4 over 5, and I am done. Then for this second problem here, we first need to turn this into an improper fraction. So we're going to end up with 10 over 3 times by 5 times by 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18, -18 all over 5. And I'm going to times this, and again, I need to turn this into a fraction, so I'm going to put that over 1. So that's going to be -3 over 1. So as I work at this, I'm going to just multiply straight across on my numerators and straight across on my denominators. So as I do that, I'm going to end up with 10 times by 18, which is going to be 180, and then I'm going to take 180 and times that by 3, and I'm going to see that that is going to be 0, 24, carry the 2, 3 times by 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5, so 540. Now I just need to make sure that I have my signs correct. So a positive times by a negative would have made this -180. This -180 times by this -3 right here would have given me a positive answer, which means my answer should be positive 540. So I have 540 over 3 times by 5, which is 15, times by 1, which is going to be 15. So 540 over 15 is my answer. However, we know that if it ends in a 0 or ends in a 5, it is divisible by 5. So I'm going to divide the top by 5. I'm going to divide the bottom by 5. So as I do 540 divided by 5, I know that goes one time, which means I can minus 5 right here. I'm going to get 0, 4, and it does not go into 4, so I'm going to put a 0. So I'm going to put a 0 right here, and I'm going to bring that right down here, and it's going to end up with a 40. And 5 does go into 48 times, so that's going to be 40, and I'm going to minus, that's going to be 0. So as we look at that, we're going to end up with 108 all over 3, okay? And now we need to determine whether or not 3 can go into 108, and I believe it can. So we're going to do 108 divided by 3. So 3 does not go into 1, but 3 does go into 10, and it goes in 3 times, so this will be 9. So I'll subtract this, and we will get 1. So we'll bring down this 8, we'll get 18. 3 goes into 18 6 times, so we're going to get 18 minus, and we get 0. So now we have 36 over 1, because 108 divided by 3 is 36, and 3 divided by 3 is 1, so that means our answer is equal to 36. So go ahead and try these on your own. Go ahead and pause that video, and then we will resume this once you've come back with your answers, and then you can verify and check to make sure you're getting the same answers as I am and that you are understanding how to do these properly. So as we look at this first problem right here, we got negative 6 over 5 divided by negative 1 over 2. When we are dividing fractions, instead we want to multiply by the reciprocal, so we get negative 6 over 5 times by negative 2 over 1. And when we do that, that becomes positive 12 over 5, and that is going to be our answer, because a negative times by a negative is a positive. For problem number 2, again, we are working with fractions, and when we're dividing by fractions, we want to instead multiply by the reciprocal. But my first step here is going to be changing this fraction right here into an improper fraction. So 3 times by 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8, so I have 1 over 3 divided by negative 8 over 3. So I need to, again, multiply by the reciprocal, so I have 1 over 3 times by 3 over 8, and I need to make sure that stays negative. So I'm going to be equaling that out to negative 3 all over 24, and I know that this is my answer, but I can still reduce this answer because I can divide both the top and the bottom by 3, which means I'm going to end up with a negative 1 all over 8 as my answer. For problem number 3, I have 1.8 times by 5.1, so I'm just going to set that up as 18 times by 51, or 1.8 times by 5.1. As I multiply this out, 1 times 1.8 is just going to be 18, add that 0, 5 times 8 is going to be 40, carry the 4, and 5 times 1 is 5 plus 4 is going to be 9. So I end up with 918, and then because I come in one decimal place here and one decimal place here, I need to come in 2 decimal places here. So my final answer needs to be negative 9.18, and that is because I know that a positive times by a negative is a negative, and when I have these 2 decimal spots right there, I need to bring in my decimal on my answer by 2. For problem number 4, we have a negative 6.3 times by a negative 0.6. So I can just go ahead and take 6.3 and times it by 0.6. So 6 times 3 is 18, carry the 1. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 1 is 37. And I know that if I multiply this by 0, it's all just going to cancel out. So I have 378. I'm going to come in 2 decimal places. So on my answer, I need to come in 2 decimal places. So my final answer is going to be 3.78, and it's 3.78 because I know a negative times by a negative is a positive. For this next problem right here, we have 3 rational numbers being multiplied together, which means that we first need to change this middle number into an improper fraction. So 8 times by 7 is going to be 56. And 56 plus 7 is going to be 63. So I have negative 2 over 3 times by 63 all over 8. And that's going to be times by 3 over 2. So as I multiply, I just go ahead and go across for my numerators and for my denominators. So I'm going to take negative 2 times by 3, which is going to give me negative 6. And then I'm going to take 63 and times it by 6, and 6 times 3 is going to be, oh, we have already done this one up here, 63 times 6, so I should end up with 378, because 3 and 6 is 18, plus 1, 6 and 6 is 36, plus 1 is, what would be, 37. So we have 378, and because it was a negative times by a positive, that means this is going to be a negative 378. And we are on bottom going to be doing 3 times by 8, which is 24, and 24 times by 2, which is going to be 48. So we're ending up with a negative 378 all over a 48. Now this is an answer that I'm going to get, but we can continue to simplify this answer because I can see both of these are even. So I can take 378 and divide it by 2. So 378 divided by 2. 2 goes into 3 one time, so that's going to be 2 minus, I'm going to get 17. 2 goes into 17 8 times, so I'm going to do 16 minus, that's going to be a 1. I bring down that 8. And 2 goes into 18 9 times, so that's going to be 18 minus 0. So I'm going to end up with negative 189 all over 48, which is also going to be divided by 2. And when I divide 48 by 2, I'm going to end up with 24. And when we look at this 189 and 24, we just need to check to see if these are divisible by 3. So 9 plus 8 is 17. Plus 1 is 18, which is divisible by 3, and 24 we know is divisible by 3, so I can keep simplifying this by dividing both of these numbers by 3. So 189 divided by 3, 3 does not go into 1, but it does go into 18 6 times. So we're going to get 18 right here, that's going to be 6, that's going to be 0, bring down that 9, and that's going to be 3, and we're going to end up with a 0 right here. So we're going to end up with negative 63 all over 8. And now this negative 63 all over 8, I believe, is completely simplified now. Now as we look at this last one here right here, we have this negative 7.2 times by 0.1 times by negative 100. So we're just going to multiply these through. Now it's probably the easiest to start with negative 100 times by either one of these numbers, because when we're multiplying by 100, we're just going to move our decimal place to the right by 2. So if we do that on this number right here, we can take this 100 and times it by 0.1, so that will be 100, and we are going to see that we are moving in by 1, so we're going to move this in by 1, so we're going to end up with negative 7.2 times by 10. So we moved that decimal place twice, which is how we ended up at the 10. And as we look at this 7.2 times by 10, that's going to again move our decimal place 1 to the right, because we can do 7.2 times by 10, which is going to be 0.00027, and then bring that decimal place in 1. So that'll be at 72. Now I just need to decide if this is going to be a negative or a positive. Well, I had a negative times by a positive, which is, I know, a negative. Then I took that negative and I times it by a negative, which gives me a positive. So this should be a positive 72. So with this real life application here, we are going to be looking at a stock investor who owns 3 different stocks, A, B, and C. And we're going to find the mean change in the value of those stocks over some given time period. So for stock A, we see that that is negative 180.39. For stock B, we see that that change was 127.28. And for stock C, we see that that was negative 280.52. So we need to find the sum of all of these changes to find out the total change. And then we can divide that change by the number of stocks that we are working with in order to find the mean change in these stocks. So as we do this, we're going to just take these two negative numbers first and add them together, just so that we have our like terms with each other. So we're going to take this 180.39 and we're going to add that 280.52. As we do this, this 9 plus 2 is going to be 11, carry the 1, 5 and 3 is 8, 9. Bring down our decimal, that's going to be 0, that's going to be 16, carry the 1, and this is going to be 4. So we end up with 460.91. Now again, because both of these numbers were negative over here, that means my answer over here still needs to be that negative 460.91. Now I can add that to this number right here, and I'll add that 127.28. And because I am looking at this being a negative plus a positive, what that actually means is I'm going to be canceling things out, which means I need to work with subtraction. So I'm going to take this 460.91 and I'm going to subtract this 127.28. And as I do that, I'm going to see that this 9 needs to be borrowed from. 11 minus 8 is going to be 3, 8 minus 2 is going to be 6. And then we can borrow from this 6 to make it a 5, and this will become a 10, that'll be 3, and this will be 3, and this will be 3. So for our sum of all of these stocks together, we should end up with 333.63 as our change. Now because our bigger number was negative, that means it was a loss of 333.63. Now we then need to take this number and put it over 3 because we're looking at the average change of, or the mean change of these stocks. So as we divide this by 3, we should end up with negative 111.21 as our mean change. So again, the way that we set this up for our mean is we took those numbers and we added them together and we divided them by 3. As we did that, we ended up with negative 333.63 divided by 3, which gave us negative 111.21, which means the mean change in the value of the stocks is negative $111.21. Okay, so again, as we work with this next problem, what we want to do is do a lot of the same stuff. For our mean, we need to find the sum of each of these numbers right here. After we find the sum of each of these numbers, we know that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of those numbers. So we're going to divide that sum by 4. So as we do this, we can see that we have a negative right here and a negative right here. So it would probably be easiest to start by adding those together. So we have 25.63 plus 44.28. So as I do this, 3 and 8 is 11. Carry the 1. 6 and 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Bring down that decimal. 5 and 4 is 9, and 2 and 4 is going to be 6. So I know this is going to be negative 69.91 because both of my original numbers were negative, which means we just treated it like normal addition but kept the sign. Then as we move on to these next two numbers right here are positive numbers. We can just add those together real fast. So we're going to end up with 37.15 plus 18.92. So 2 and 5 is going to be 7, 9 and 1 is going to be 10, so I can put the 0 down there, carry the 1. 7 and 8 is 15, plus 1 is 16, carry the 1, and we have 3, 4, 5, which gives us a 56.07. And I know that it is a positive 56.07 because my two numbers over here were positive. So now that I have two numbers right now, I can continue adding these together. So as I take 69 or negative 69.91 and I add that to 56.07, because one is positive and one is negative, what I'm actually going to be doing is subtracting. So I'm going to take that 69.91, I'm going to subtract that 56.07, and I'm going to take away from this 9, so I can borrow and make this 1 and 11. 11 minus 7 is 4, 8 minus 0 is 8, 9 minus 6 is 3, and 6 minus 5 is 1. So I have 13.84. Now because my bigger number was negative, that means that this 13.84 needs to be negative. So I have negative 13.84. So this is the sum of my four numbers up here. I added negative 25.63, 37.15, 18.92, and negative 44.28. to get a sum of negative 13.84. But since we're finding the mean here, the next step in this is to divide that number by the total number of numbers that we had. So we had 4 numbers, which means I need to take this 13.84 and I need to divide that by 4. So I'll do 13.84 and divide that by 4. 4 does not go into 1, but it does go into 13. It goes 3 times into 13, which makes this 12. When I subtract that, I end up with 1. I need to bring down that 8. Make sure I have my decimal place right there. So that 18, 4 times by 4 is going to give me 16. As I subtract that, that's going to be 2. I'm going to bring down that 4, which is going to be 6, and 6 times 4 is going to be 24, and I'm going to subtract and get 0. So when we divide 13.84 by 4, we end up with 3.46, but because it's a negative divided by a positive, that means my answer should be negative. So the mean of negative 25.63, 37.15, 18.92, and negative 44.28 is going to be negative 3.46. So what if the change in the value of stock D is $568.23? What does that do to the mean change in the value of the 4 stocks? Well, if we remember, this sum right here was negative 333.63. So if we can remember that sum, then we just need to add in this number right here. And then once we add in that number right there, we need to divide that new total sum by 4 in order to find out its new mean value. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 568.23 and we're adding these two numbers together. But wait, we have a negative and a positive, which means we actually need to subtract this. So I need to rewrite this with 568.23 on top, minus that 333.63. 3 and 3 take away is 0. And we're going to borrow from this 8, make it a 7, so I have enough to take away. So now I have 12 minus 6, which is 6, 7 minus 3, which is 4, 6 minus 3, which is 3, and 5 minus 3, which is 2. So now I have 234.60. Now as I look at this, I know I had a negative plus a positive, and my bigger number was positive, which means my answer over here is going to be positive. So I'm going to take this new number right here, and I'm going to divide this new number by 4. So we're going to take 234.60 divided by 4. 4 times 4 does not go into 2, so I need to check for 23. 4 does go into 23, it goes 5 times, so that's going to be 20. 23 minus 20 is going to give me 3, so I need to bring down that 4. 4 goes into 34 8 times, so 4 times by 8 is 32. I minus that and I'm going to get with 2, and then I'm going to bring down this 6 and I'm going to have 26. 4 does go into 26 and it goes 6 times, which gives me 24. Bring down this 2, and then I can bring down this 0 right here, which is 20, which means this is going to be 520, and done. So I know that the new average of all of these stocks is going to be 58.65. So the mean of the mean change, including stock D, is going to be this $58.65. Okay, so now we have our mini assessment here. Go ahead and multiply or divide and write fractions in the simplest form. Make sure you leave them as improper fractions. And as you go through this, go ahead and get this ready for Friday. And for problem number 5, we see that the cell phone company will deduct $2.74 for each month you were accidentally overcharged. You were overcharged for the last 4 months. What integer represents the deduction that will be made on your next bill?